I had it cut yesterday just in case.
Just before that, I actually didn't go because I wanted my hair to be still a little bit more blonde from the vacation. As soon as you
Oh,
go now
nice.
to it gets a little
Well,
bit more
I've
blonde.
had these very expensive highlights in. Jim's got them down here as well.
I've got lots of those highlights, yes.
It looks like participants are getting in, so in a few minutes you should have everybody in there.
I got the ball cap on because I could not get a haircut.
It was an odd experience having it done with masks on and screens and all that sort of thing. Haven't got used to that yet.
Here we go.
So it's going to be interesting. What is a magic number that we think we can start?
I would say get started with introductions and things, and maybe a few more people will keep joining.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so thank you guys for joining us today for a session on how to perfectly set up your rig. It's a Chrosziel Masterclass, we called it, but in general, we want to have a very nice discussion all together, especially with Jim and John in regards to your experience. Just for a short introduction on myself, I'm the CEO of Chrosziel, and Chrosziel is a German or Munich-based company which develops and creates accessories around the camera. So everything besides the camera and the lens, we offer accessories. And that's the reason why we thought it's going to be nice to talk about all kind of setups and rigs, what you can set up your camera with. And instead of having a one-to-one show, I'm very happy to have Jim and John with me today as experienced guys out there on the field. So let's hand over that to who wants to start. Jim, John, who wants to go first?
Oh, Jim's got a hat on. He should go first.
Okay. I get it with the hat. Just to introduce myself, I started working as a news photographer and sports photographer in local television back in the late 90s. So I've been doing this quite a while. I spent about 12 years working in local news, moving on to network news at NBC, working for a company here called the NBC News Channel, covering everything from football, the Super Bowl and big sports events to, as we were talking about earlier, covering hurricanes like the one that just came through. So I moved from that in 1997, left there and started my own production company as a freelance photographer, videographer, and bought a camera and some equipment and, started getting out there and trying to make a living. We are now in year 23. We do quite a bit of sports work still. We work a lot with Fox Sports, the NFL network, covering the Carolina Panthers here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we also do some corporate stuff. Lowe's Home Improvement headquarters, the world headquarters are here in my town, and do a lot of work with those guys and their vendors. So we do a little bit of everything. I still do some news from time to time. And I've seen a lot of change. And with that, I'll turn it over to John, and he's playing with his toys. So he can talk about what he does and we can go from there.
Hi everyone, I'm John Fry from Salisbury in Wiltshire in the UK. I'm a lighting cameraman, and I suppose I went freelance about 2000, 2001, something like that. I mainly work in high-level corporate video stuff. I've DOP'd 2 feature films now, lots of other bits and pieces, but my real passion speciality is Steadicam, which is that thing in the background there without a camera on it at the moment. And I've worked for all the major broadcasters in the UK, but keep coming back to corporate video because there's a slightly higher standard overall than newsy stuff, and you get to play with all the toys, and they pay a bit better. And yeah, that's me. So dipped into lots and lots of different worlds with Steadicam, and just build up the equipment and the bits and pieces as you go.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds like we have 2 guys with a lot of experience here with us, so that's perfect for us. So I think John even started it already about the different setups. So let's right away jump into those different setups. The idea is maybe that we real quick talk about those different setups, and then we jump into the more detailed rig setups. John, when we start with you guys, how or what kind of setups do you use for what kind of shooting? So when do you use a shoulder setup? When do you use a tripod setup, a Steadicam setup? Like in general, what's the thing about that?
Okay, in general, well, there is no general because no 2 days are the same. I had 5 days last year, for example, that I was on a feature film on the Monday in the big Steadicam. I was doing newsy stuff on the Tuesday on the tripod and on the shoulder mainly. On the Wednesday, it was a big corporate gig, so we had all the big toys, sliders, bits and pieces. The Thursday was an outside broadcast, so we had a few other different toys there. And then Friday, I think I was just sat doing some sports stuff. I don't really do sports stuff, but that just happened to be a week where I did the whole range of everything in a week, which was quite exciting. But the choosing the right gear for the job is obviously very important, and it depends mainly on if it's a scripted thing, what the script says, and the director, what sort of style they're after. So if they want some of those beautiful moving shots, then the A-class piece of equipment for that is a Steadicam. If they need lots of long lens moving stuff, then you've got to go onto a track, or maybe a slider will do. If they've got no money, then you use the gimbal. Then and that gives you a bit of lovely movement there. Otherwise, for more static things, tripod is still #1 piece of camera support equipment in the world for a very good reason. ENG stuff, so running around catching newsy style footage. We do a lot of what they call, can't think what they call them now, case studies for clients of companies. And we often have to work very quickly. So cameras on the shoulder or on the tripod or off the tripod onto the floor, or maybe some gimbal stuff as well. So operating very quickly needs a setup that you can jump in and out of. So having the same camera being able to go quickly on and off the tripod, or perhaps onto another, or perhaps a second camera on a smaller setup is very useful to have for working fast. When you're working slowly, as I say, on more scripted things, dramas, high-level TV stuff, films, then you can get the big toys out. You've got time to rig up the bigger pieces of equipment with exactly what you need, prime lenses, all that sort of gear. So it really depends on what exactly the shoot is, who it's for, what budget they have, and well, in some cases, what kit you have available.
Makes total sense. James, how about you?
Very similar. From the greatest thing about this job and being like both John and I as freelancers, we work for different people every day. So you rarely do the same thing twice. And I would agree that it goes back to, what the subject matter. What are you shooting? if I'm shooting sports live, I'm probably going to be either on my shoulder, standing on the sidelines, or at a racetrack running around with a camera very quickly. Or if I need some long lens stuff, shooting football maybe from a distance, I'm going to be on sticks with a longer lens. And then we shoot a lot of sports features. So, short 3 to 5 minute stories about an athlete, whatever the subject, an interesting story, hopefully. But with that, we try to incorporate as much we can with what that client wants to do. And when I say that, I mean, I may have 2 cameras, maybe a 3-camera shoot. I've got 2 cameras on tripods. I've got a camera on a slider. If we're walking around in an environment, I've got a very good friend who is an expert at Steadicam. We bring him in, and David does the work for us with the Steadicam. And then we also, take it a step further occasionally and bring in a drone or one of the small gimbals if we're in a tight environment. So it changes all the time. And, that's probably question number 1 before you go to the shoot is, what do you need to do the job?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, John, you mentioned a very interesting topic about that you have to switch very fast from one kind of setup to another one. Before we focus on that, I just want to encourage everybody in the webinar, if you have questions, write them anytime. So it's not something that only us 3 want to do a panelist thing, but we really want you to have on the side. There's on the bottom, there's something like chat. So just type in questions or even raise your hand and we will see that. And then this way, we can actually make that even a more better discussion, really suited to what you're interested in. So, but let's deep dive into that. So John, you said you have to often change from one setup to the other. So for example, going from Steadicam to shoulder tripod, this kind of change. What do you use to go from one side to another? Do you use those standard blades from the tripod as an example, or do you go with the quick lock VCT blades as an example, or other systems?
Well, generally speaking, there's a VCT on the tripod and on the Steadicam, so that ideally you'd only be doing one or the other, because Steadicam is quite an involved process to get it right and to do well. So when you're on the set as the Steadicam operator, that tends to be your sole role. But for my own purposes and a lot of the little films we've done has involved just a bit of Steadicam, so I make sure that all my setup works very well. So there we go. Tim's got a standard VCT 14 camera plate there, which locks into the plate that's on the tripod, and you simply have one of those camera.
Yeah, I have one here as well. So
there we go. And
there we go.
So this is an old style Sony one that came with one of our old cameras, I think, actually. But you can see it locks in the camera pretty nicely, and there are much better and more modern versions of that now, thankfully, that are have less play in. But yeah, jumping between those enable the camera to, you see how quickly it came off there. That's as quick as it goes back onto the tripod. So when you're going handheld, you can lock straight off onto the tripod, come straight off again with matter of seconds. Which makes all the difference when you really need to get that extra shot super low or run off after somebody and then come back and have the stability of the tripod for the interviews or whatever long lens stuff you're doing. Being able to come off and on the tripod particularly very quickly is very important.
Yeah. So you have that quick lock blade always on the tripod and on the Steadicam, always mounted, and then you go one and back and forth with those blades. How about Jim?
I'm going to jump in right there, and I've actually got one too. I've got 2 of these with my rigs, and they're awesome. The most important thing you want with a tripod even on a steady cam or on a slider rig, is stability. So you want, you don't want to just barely touch the camera and have it wobble. It's going to ruin your shot. You want to be rock steady the whole time. And this quick lock plate is awesome, and it locks in like nothing I've ever seen before. Frankly, I love this piece.
Thanks so much for that great feedback. Yeah, we actually had a question like what's a VTC plate or plate, but yeah, that's what we explained just right now. Yeah, the special thing about the VCT, it's not VTC, it's VCT, by the way. So the VCT14 is the most known blade, which is from Sony. And then other manufacturers like us with Chrosziel, we offer that as well. And like Jim said, special about our blade is that we have a mechanism in the back where it pulls down the camera and pushes it forward. And this way it gets really heavily locked. And even there's another very famous Munich manufacturer. You guys all know about them with an A at the beginning. And for their robotic systems, for example, they even use our one as an OEM purchase because it is, like you said, extremely stable and not wibbling. And this way it cannot start shaking up, especially on those cranes. It's very important, or on gimbals. But gimbals is a different thing, I would say. Probably John,
Yeah,
you
because
can.
gimbals are much lighter, it's very difficult
Yeah.
to mount something as heavy as that on there. Even if you were going to have a camera that could be, something similar size that could go on a gimbal, or you've got a gimbal big enough for something like that, I don't think you'd try and put a VCT on there because it's an extra, unnecessary heavy thing. You want to keep as minimal weight as possible on the gimbal systems because they're quite fatiguing anyway.
Yeah. Probably, Jim, you agree probably as well, right?
Yep.
How
Absolutely.
about it on jibs and on a jib, on a crane, you would use as well the VCT plates?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was on a shoot not too long ago where the jib operator saw the quick lock plate and came over and asked if he could borrow it because he saw what it was doing, and we took it off one of my other tripods and used it on the jib head, and it worked great. It really locks in the camera and keeps it where it needs to be, nice and solid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we actually, this is now the 5th version we are offering, and we have very good sales on that. And so it's really very widely used in a lot of applications. So when we look now at those setups, how about if you go onto a shoulder and have to work the whole day? Do you have anything supporting you guys? Do you use like an easy rig or something for it, or do you mainly shoot from the shoulder?
I don't shoot from with an easy rig. I have tried them. They certainly have their application, but if I'm working in a tight environment, let's say for example I'm working on pit road at a racetrack, the easy rig's not going to work because you've got to get into tight places,
Okay.
and I want the ability to, if I have to quickly get out of someone's way, move the camera, take it down off my shoulder, get from point A to point B 40 yards down the row. It's you want to answer your question, you want a very balanced camera with nice padding. If you're going to be out for a long day, I think we've all probably at one time or another had something that the padding was worn down, and you get home and your shoulder's red and it's sore, and that's not what you want. You want something that's very nicely padded, sits in the right place, balances front to back with the camera nicely, gives you a place to put your hands, or even on the lens, and front to back balance is the most important thing, because I want that camera, sitting almost as if I could hold, 2 fingers and hold the front of the camera up, balanced perfectly from back to front.
Yeah. So besides the quick lock blades, do you use any other blades, like sliding blades as an example for the heavier setups? If we look at those, this is now a 19 millimeter setup. We actually can talk about that as well, but you have those sliding mechanism on there. Is that something you use as well, mainly on if you have bigger cameras, or how about that?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, with bigger setups, Alexa Minis, FX9, we've had one on. I don't bother with 19s on my FS7. But yeah, those extra little slidey plates can be really useful. The Steadicam has one built in. The top of the Steadicam stage has its own plate, which you then put. I tend to put my VCT14 on top of, so that also gives the same, if not a bit more, level of travel than you usually get on your normal tripod head, which is quite useful. But yeah, when we're doing big things and we've got loads of gear on, an extra way of, well, if nothing else, sometimes it's easier to slide the camera back on that 19 plate than it is to unlock everything and move the matte box forward to change lenses and things like that. So having different ways of adjusting the camera's balance when it's on, particularly on a tripod, is actually really useful. Don't think I'd want a 90mm setup on my shoulder very much.
It's a little bit heavy. How about Jim?
We have a couple of the plates that allow you to do that, and I was just thinking while John was talking, the accessories that you put on, things like when you build out these rigs now, you may start with the head of a camera that's 5 pounds, and you start adding things front to back, and lenses and batteries on the back, and monitors and everything, and that goes from 5 to 22, 24 pounds. So the more variety you have, the more ability to adjust forward, backwards, like you're talking about with that plate. If you take it and can slide the rails one way or the other way. One of the things that I wanted to point out today was batteries. I brought just for an example, this is an older, I'll call it AB battery here, but everybody knows this battery, and it weighs 5 or 6 pounds. If you are offsetting a lot of weight on the front of the camera, it's great. But if you want balance, there's some new stuff out there that is, this is a brand new battery that's out with another manufacturer, but it's 1.5 pounds. So you're talking about what you put on the front, what you put on the back, the ability to adjust front to back with the rails. That's going to make all the difference in how you put that camera together, what it sits on, how it balances, and really what does make the perfect camera for you.
What was that, Jim? An old 160 Dionic?
Yeah, it was a 140. It's a 140.
140. Yeah. So I have the new version AB 150, and I've got a couple of those as well, because they used to be useful for balancing at the bottom of the Steadicam, those big old heavy batteries. But the modern equivalent, same watt hour, it's something like a third of the weight, and it's got all these other features like percentage indicators and USB outputs for charging your phone.
Yeah. The new Core Mini has the same thing. It's 1.5 pounds. I think under 1.5 pounds, and exactly the same amount of power it's putting out as the old bigger ones.
Well, it's going to be interesting now to talk about those balancing thing, like how do you balance it with a battery? But since we encourage the guys to really post their questions, we have Matthew asking if you typically have prep days for jobs to get your setups locked in, and how common will you be changing things on the fly during the day? So it all depends on how organized the show and the producer is, I guess. But yeah. Tell us a little
Yeah,
bit about it.
if it's big TV stuff, multiple day shoots, generally they would include a prep day, but that's not necessarily the case for a lot of what I do, which even if they're fairly big events, or shoots for corporate clients, they don't understand what's necessary. So you have to kind of do your own prep day, which is great if you're supplying all the gear. But often it means hiring the gear early, so that you can go through it, adding your own prep day to your own schedule before it gets before the client doesn't know or care. But yeah, generally speaking, big film and TV stuff, they'll have a prep day or so. But often we're prepping our own gear in the workshop beforehand, and changing things on the fly pretty often actually. Because so many things change, there's so many variables with filmmaking. That's one of the great things we love about it, because there's a huge variety of stuff you can shoot, and often things crop up that you want to shoot that you didn't think of beforehand, or somebody hadn't prepped or whatever. And so having spare bits in the car is a must.
I would back that up 100%. Preparation is, in my opinion, probably as or even more important than the actual shoot day. Because if you know what you're going into and you spend time beforehand, whether it's a prep day given to you or you make time for yourself to get ready for that shoot the next day or the next week or whatever, that's going to make the difference. Hopefully you've got all your ducks in a row. You know the equipment you need. You know what you're gonna do when you get on location, and it's so much easier to step right in and already have a game plan ahead of time. And as far as being on the fly, one thing that John and I both deal with all the time is the weather. If you shoot outside a lot, like I was outdoors yesterday on a shoot. It was really hot, blazing. If we had not had the right equipment there, we'd have probably all roasted. And the same thing could be said if I was out there today and it's pouring down rain outside. Yeah, you've always got to have a plan B, no matter what your shoot is. Have a plan B and be prepared to take a right instead of a left sometimes. So that's part of making sure you do the job right.
That's something my Steadicam assistants get briefed at the beginning of every day. At all times, you will have with you the rain cover for the camera and the monitor and things, at least a couple of spare BNC cables, and water, because I forget to drink when we're shooting something quite intense. I'm the worst at forgetting to drink. So especially on a hot day like Jim experiences over there at the moment, not so much here, then staying hydrated, staying cool, but still having to get the job done. Because there's nothing worse than trying to operate something fairly complicated in a complicated environment when you're starting to get a headache through dehydration. That is the hardest part of the job for me, I have to say.
Can I just add one more point to that? And that is, the more you can prepare, the less problem you're going to have when you get there, and you never have enough time. It seems like if you get there and you've got 2 hours of prep before a shoot, when you arrive to set up, you're looking at your watch and you got 10 minutes and you still need to do this, and this before you get ready to roll. So there's never enough time. And if you are as meticulous as most of us, you'll sit right there and tweak right down to the last minute. So anything you can do ahead of time to prevent that from happening is a plus.
Yeah, and then additionally, I think what you have to always have in thought about is, what kind of equipment do you want to equip yourself? Do you really want to save those bucks to pay maybe a $100 something? Or do you rather go for a little bit more expensive gear, which is out there on the market for a couple of years really, and has those experience, and this way you have those equipment working? I mean, it's even with the cameras, like, do you really want to use those very low entry cameras sometimes, because you have to do so much around that, which gives you a headache? And if this gives, if you cannot work creative on set, but always just troubleshooting your gear, I think that's something really important as well to always keep in mind where to spend money and where not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Spending money on equipment is always an uncertain thing, because you always want to have the biggest, brightest, best cameras, because you want to do the best job you can, right? But there are sensible decisions and there are poor decisions, and it's always a balancing act. Generally speaking, I've found that investing in as good as you can afford, is beneficial in the long term, because the kit lasts longer. The clients and people around you see that you've put your money where your mouth is and invested in decent equipment, which hopefully that means you'll do a decent job, because you've got to pay for it. And it is always difficult to know what to buy and when, but there are some things that come along that are just a good investment forever. Decent matte box, decent VCT 14 plate, decent microphone. Cameras come and go. I mean, we've both got FS7s, as you can see there, because in whenever it was 2014, 2015, when they were announced, that there was simply nothing else out there that performed the same role as well, in a way that most cameramen could immediately pick up and use quickly, for a decent price. And so that's turned out to be a good investment for all of us. Now it's not such, at this particular moment in history, it's not such an easy equation. So we're all thinking of what cameras to invest in next, and what amazing support gear might be out there to help us use them better.
Yeah, let me just quickly add that my first camera worked and was the best for 10 years. In the last 5 years, aside from the FS7 II, we've purchased 3 other cameras, because the needs of the client changes and the cameras keep getting better and better and better. And as a freelancer, that is probably our biggest challenge. That first camera I paid off very quickly. It was profitable for several years after. And now you have to really think about that decision. Okay, is it time to buy a new camera, and how long is that camera going to keep making me money? The business side of it is way tougher now than it was 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah, back then, sure. Digibeta, that's all you need. But now there's so many other requirements, and
right.
What else do you do? Sorry, Jim. James, it's Tim.
Yeah, it's for sure a topic about this changing speed of cameras. Even for us, it's getting now really tricky to stay up with the speed. The amount of cameras coming out, and the manufacturers are getting even more confidential about that. So before, we would know 1 year before that the FS7 would come out, and we get all the 3D data and everything. Nowadays, we get informed about FX9 2 days before the show starts, at IBC, where they introduced it, and we were all sitting there like, come on, guys, we cannot even check any more compatibility of our existing gear. But like you said, it's changing and getting faster and faster. And right now, cameras are dropping out with the Komodo, with the R6, R7 cameras, the Alpha 7, the new one. They all have so neat features in there, so that you really have to stay on top. But a totally different topic, I think. We could talk hours about that, but that's not the topic of what we want to talk about. But you already mentioned about those batteries giving you a nice weight on the back, and of course the new battery is giving you less weight on the back, but this as well gives you new problems, I think, because you want your camera somehow balanced on your shoulder when you have it on there, not maybe the whole time sitting on your arms, but rather have it nicely balanced there with a counterbalance. How is it with you guys? Are you trying as good as possible to balance that camera on your shoulder, or is it more about, for example, the nodal point, like where the sensor is, that the sensor, when you, for example, do a slow pan, that you have a different feeling than when the sensor is in the back. What's your strategy about that?
I would, one of the things that's helped me greatly is lens choice, because the weight of the lens on the front versus what you've got on the back of the camera really can help or hurt you. You know, Canon has an amazing 17-120 lens, zoom cine lens, or zoom prime lens that it's beautiful glass. But if you don't have anything on the back, it's a very heavy lens on the front of the camera, and you're holding that lens up the whole time you're shooting. And you can counterbalance that and make up for it. It's going to overall change the entire weight of the camera. But for example, a difference, the Fuji MK lenses are, this lens probably weighs a third of what that other big lens weighs, and it really, really helps. And the fact that we can now add a zoom motor to it and run it off the FS7, it ties right into the rocker on the zoom on the FS7. It really lightens the front of that camera, so that helps. That helps a lot. The other thing is, if we go with strictly a prime lens, this is a shorter barrel lens, so that weight is going to be back with the Cine Primes that Canon has. But you're trying to get compact. You're trying to not stretch out and have an imbalance of weight front to back. And like you said, I want the front of that camera, the sensor of that camera, basically right off my right ear. I want to be able to, whether I'm focusing with my hand, using a focus control, or whatever. I want everything, or just handles on the camera itself. I want everything in real tight, so my arms are closer to me, closer to my body, and I'm not doing this all day long, supporting the weight that's on the front of the camera. So yeah, to answer your question, I want that camera sitting back. I want to be in really nice and tight, and that way I can not use as much energy and let my body take the weight of the camera instead of my arms.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that entirely. There are things you can do to cheat. So if this is set up fairly nicely now, it's a little bit front heavy. I cheat a little bit and put this monitor on. It's quite a useful monitor anyway. It's one of the Atomos Ninja Vs on an arm, so I can move this back and forward just to adjust my weight a little bit, and then the director feels like he's more important because he's got a monitor pointing at him, and actually it's just to help my balance, right? So I could almost let go of that now, and it's pretty happy on my shoulder. It's going to stay there. I'm using minimal energy to keep it there, which means I've got maximum focus on the shot. Because anything that distracts you, anything that's uncomfortable, anything you're fighting with in terms of camera setup, means that that's a bit of concentration that's taken away from what you're supposed to be doing, right? So you want it set up as well as you can. This is even more important when it comes to Steadicam, not least because you're physically wearing it. It costs a lot more money, but it's also a lot more precise an instrument. So I tend to use my big old AB batteries on the Steadicam quite often because I want more weight on it. More weight also means more inertia. Yes, it's a little bit more effort, but as long as it's balanced properly, it's not detrimental effort. It's effort that actually helps your shot. It's like drag on your tripod head. The more drag you have, actually the smoother shots you have. It's harder work, but it's helping you get a better shot, so it's work that's worth it. It's work that's paying for itself, So something we didn't mention about balance, of course, you've got your front and back balance. So, front of the camera, back of the camera. Yes, great to have it there, but what about your side to side? Because, that's equally as important, because especially on the shoulder, that gets worn out quite quickly, especially if you're trying to push it one way or another. So being able to move the centre of balance sideways is quite useful as well. And there's some camera plates that actually allow you to move the shoulder pad so that left and right, so that you can get ideal balance there. Not so important with a lot of these camera setups because they're pretty center weighted anyway, so that's quite cool. But again, on the Steadicam, that's vital. Even adding a radio transmitter or anything like that, taking a microphone off, adding a any odd little thing to the side of the camera can make a huge difference to the way the thing actually sits upright. So having side to side adjustment on the Steadicam is an A class thing that every Steadicam has to have, because that side to side balance is just as important in that situation.
So what's your tip about making that possible, those side balance things? Because most times your camera blade and the shoulder pad is fixed. Do you use those articulated arms like you're showing there, and then this way?
I've got the articulated.
So this way you can move a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got the arm on here, which is able to move the monitor around, so I can have the monitor on the side or on the top of the camera or at the back of the camera or even over the other side. I've got radio transmitters that generally live on this side of the camera anyway, which help counteract that on the other side. I can move. I've actually got a mic mount that I've sort of bodged together that I can move in and out from the camera as well. So you've got various things that you can add or subtract to help keep that camera as well balanced in the center of your vision, in the center of your shoulder bones there. So it sits as comfortably as possible, isn't trying to flop off your shoulder or whack you in the side of the head on the other side. So yeah, adding and subtracting accessories that most of the time you need anyway, but having a way to mount them that can help you adjust the balance of the overall system can be quite useful. There we go. That's what I do anyway.
Jim, do you agree with everything, or would you say, hey, sometimes I would rather add some weight?
Everything he said is wrong. Everything I'm teasing. No, he's absolutely perfect.
Well, remember, we want a discussion, right? We want to really start fighting, No.
No, the only thing I would add to that is it's very important to have what we know as a cheese plate on the top of the camera, because that gives you those points to put and reposition the things like the monitor or attach your receivers on there. It gives you more variables, and that way you've got. I can show you quickly.
We're gonna post a link to give you an idea about a cheese plate.
If you see
it's
the
called
one
cheese because it's full of holes.
That's right. Exactly. So if you see this, I've got my monitor, just as John was saying, on the other side. I've got a small HD here, and then I could move it anywhere I wanted to, front, back. I've even got some places on the handle of this to put this, but that makes a huge difference. Oops, I got my microphone.
Exactly. So
makes a huge difference there.
So how about a lot of cameras have already accessories points on top of that? I'm actually looking at the FX9. I think it has at least 2 or 3. Do you don't want to use them instead of having rather some additional weight of a cheese plate on there because you don't trust those because of the housing, or what's your strategy about that? I mean, even if you look at camera cages for those smaller DSLR cameras, for example, or the Komodo might be a nice example from Ed coming out, which might need for sure something on top. How's that with you?
I would say that another big thing is protecting that camera. So if you've got if you've got a cage for those smaller cameras and that camera gets dropped, there's a good chance those cages are very sturdy. So they're going to protect your camera, not only as, it's not just a function of having somewhere to put something, but it's taking care of that camera on the sides, top, bottom, if it gets bumped or hit. That to me was a kind of way of protecting that FS7 when I first got it. I made sure we had something pretty much on all sides of it to take care of the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be decent stuff though, because I've had a couple of the
Right.
cheaper cages on some of our smaller cameras, and the threads aren't quite well milled enough, and we've had somebody go to pick up one of the cameras, and he's got all the weight on it, and it broke on the cage didn't break, but the actual screws through pulled out, and the whole thing nearly went for a Burton. So having a decent quality, never buy the cheapest is probably a good advice there. There's a load of options out there now, but it is really worth shopping around and having a look at what the best thought out, the best manufactured stuff is, because it, compared to the cost of the camera, you don't want to be risking that on a cheap cage or whatever that might potentially fail and drop the thing on the floor. So it is worth investing in decent stuff that sits on your camera.
Yeah, I think John said it best earlier. Buy what the nicest you can afford. Try, because it's going to last longer over a period of time, and hopefully it's going to be something that you can use, not only with that camera but the next camera and the next, or whatever it is, whether it's a microphone or a lighting system or whatever you're buying. Try to buy some tripod's a good example. Buy the best you can afford, and that tripod will last you a long time.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting discussion, a little bit off topic, but for sure that's something we have to battle with a lot, because Chrosziel is known as a manufacturer of high quality, but at the same time, we are not the cheapest. And that is together, if you want to offer support, you need to have an engineer being able to be reached. So you have to pay for that person. And then additionally, if you want a spare part, I mean, John, you already said about those mat boxes, those hold a long lifetime, basically. And especially the Chrosziel mat box, it gives us a headache because we don't sell after 2 years another one. So, but at the same time, they request spare parts, oh, I lost that screw on my shoe during the desert and never found it again in the sand. Those are things. If you're asking a Chinese manufacturer, please send me that screw, they're going to ask you whatever they're going to ask you, but they sometimes even don't understand. But we offer those additional accessories or spare parts over a long time of period, and this way it helps you to return your investment somehow, because you can use it for a long time. But like you said,
Exactly, that has happened to me. Exactly. I've had I've got a couple of older Chrosziel mat boxes in there. I've had nearly 20 years, and those things. Actually, it was with this one. I lost the tightening knob. Somebody, one of my assistants just unwound it too far. It fell off, bits and pieces. It's heat of the day. Chrosziel had one back to me, within 2 or 3 days, and it came straight from Germany. It was brilliant.
yeah, that's right.
Straight for the next shoot.
Yeah. That's exactly what we want to focus on. We want to be there. We know how much pressure is on you every day for shooting. And so we need to support you as soon as possible, or even have a replacement, like a demo gear in that time while that gear is down, to send you something you can continue to work with. That's the strategy we work on. While we were talking about that balancing, we were talking about front and back weight, and then right left. How about the center of gravity? Do you want it as low as possible, or do you don't care? Like, it doesn't matter if a lot of accessories build up more and more, higher and higher?
Well, sometimes there's just nowhere else to put them, so they have to go on top of the camera. Some things are built to be mounted on the handle, but generally speaking, you want to keep it as low as possible, so that if nothing else, wind doesn't take it and blow it around. So yeah, trying to keep it all compact height wise is generally a good advice, I think.
Yeah, I would just add to that something that we were talking about the other day, and that's with cables, video cables, microphone cables, things like that. You want to make sure everything is nice and tight up against the body of the camera, because that's just one more thing to be out there. If you happen to be going somewhere quickly and you go by and snag it on something, it's going to ruin your day. There you go. everything nice and tight up against the body of the camera, and you can use the bongo ties or whatever. We've got some little small pull cables that we pull everything in, and you do a nice Vanna White there, John.
So if we look at that cabling, so for you, it's about running that cable as neat as straight away to where it has to go. And you don't care, for example, there were in earlier times you had power running on one side and then signals on the other side and stuff like that. So you just say, hey, everything has to go nicely and the cables have to have the right quality to be able to have running a signal next to power, for example.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to.
that's something. Sorry, go on. Yeah, that's important.
No, I was saying that's the last time I had an issue with that was with a C300 I had 6 or 7 years ago, first edition, and they worked with us to help solve the problem. But it was because of a wireless microphone pack. We had a cable on the wrong side, and we were able to work around it. But I haven't had a problem with that since. But it's probably just safe and good idea to try to keep your audio and your power cables not necessarily together, but separated if you can. I don't think it's as huge a deal as it used to be, but if you get a hum in your audio, that's probably what the problem is.
Yeah, that's just general good housekeeping, trying to separate power, audio, and video. Sometimes it's not possible, and certainly when things are on your shoulder, you're using very short cables within the camera setup. If they're decent cables, they'll be well shielded, so you shouldn't really have an issue. But yeah, general housekeeping, you should try and keep your cables together not much longer than you need, so you haven't got things flopping around. One of the big problems we often have to overcome with Steadicam is being given cables with the camera kits that are just way too long for what we need. So I always have a huge bag of extra cables for things so that I can keep all of my cables as short as possible, because if you're on the Steadicam, the precise weight of everything means that when we were using tape, the difference between a full tape and a used tape, where the tape is moving within the cassette, was enough to tilt the camera up 15 or 20 degrees, right? So that's as precise as it is. So if you've got a cable coiled up hanging on the side of the camera, that just means your stability is gone. So having the right length cables as well is quite important.
Especially on gimbals. Gimbals are very sensitive to that.
Yeah, they are a pain in the ass, really, gimbals when it comes to cables, because you never know what direction you're going to be going in. Generally you're trying to keep it forward, but these things spin around on their own sometimes and got a life of their own. So having the right length cable there is difficult, but not impossible. And trying to keep everything as opposed, it's kind of the opposite with this. This you want to keep nice and tight so the cables aren't flailing around. With the gimbals, because of the nature of them, they are going to turn around. They need cable movement, so the cables need to be able to move freely. So that's kind of the opposite. I've actually found that far more difficult as a concept to get around than it comes to just routing cables neat and tidily.
So what is the trick about fixing those cables on the camera? So I'm pretty sure you want to keep your handle free because you need to carry it and you don't want to squeeze any cables. But everything around that, how do you do it? Give us a little inside trick of what to do and what you use for that. Do you use like those Velcro ties things, or what's the best thing?
Tim's got some good gear there.
Just brought over my F5, and I took for example, took one of these little pull cords. I ran through the cheese plate, create a loop, then I can bring my cables in and pull them in tight, as in This is the mic cable for the shotgun mic, but you could do the same if I have a monitor on here. I can loop that in there and pull that in tight. There are some clips that I've seen from other companies that allow you to clip and keep tie the cables directly to the rails, which is very nice. They just kind of clip on with a little gap in over the top. I know Red Rock used to make one. I'm sure they still do. But those were good for dressing, particularly if you have top rails on a camera for any reason. Then you can bring anything like from a monitor back down the rails back to the back of the camera with those clips. But either way, these little ties, little pull strips work really nice. That's just my trick.
Yeah, I do
just
exactly the
wrote that
same.
down on my development roadmap. So great input on that. But John, go ahead.
Yeah, I do the same thing with normal little bongo ties, which are the like elastic bands that come with little wooden pegs built in so that you can just easily clip them round. I've got one here holding my wireless receiver on, so that's just bongo tied on for a bit of extra security. And then I can also route cables through that and bits and pieces, and I'm often putting one on the back of the handle, so the handle's free but the back of the handle is helping to route cables and keep everything secure. So yeah, generally whatever works for you.
Is there an accessory out there which goes into the 3/8 or 1/4 screw holes? You know that you have something you screw in there and then you have that. Do you know about something like that?
Not that I can think of. No, it'd be quite useful though.
You like the idea?
Yeah, because you could put it on the cheese plate and just clip things into
Yeah,
it.
exactly. So that's something we put it on our development list. That's a good point. I think that might help you guys out there. Yeah, stay tuned for that. Okay, we have a little bit of an off-topic question real quick. Maybe John, you can take that as a really short answer about what Steadicam arm would you recommend?
Oh, well, I'd recommend the one that will take slightly more weight than the maximum camera setup you can imagine you're going to use. That's my advice there.
Okay,
Because
I hope
there's nothing worse than running out of room.
I hope that helps. Otherwise, I think this is actually a topic we can even spend probably a half an hour talking about, because I have seen some arms really breaking and stuff like that on set, and so it's really something. It's not easy topic, I think. So, but let's continue a little bit on that. You were talking about protecting the gear with blade and the top blade as an example. How about here in the front, with rod support? Are you using rods to protect your lens, or is it only about mounting accessories, or is it a combination of that?
Go ahead, John.
It's definitely a combination of things. I tend to use rails on almost all my cameras. Protection is definitely part of that. If you've got a solid two pieces of metal sticking out the front of your camera, that's going to hit the ground first instead of your lens, which, in the case of some of those gyms got their tens of thousands of pounds worth of lenses for the sake of a few £100 for a rail support and rails. So that's a no-brainer when it comes to that. Also, I tend to use the focus wheels, and particularly on Steadicam, you need the facility to add focus, iris, zoom motors. So that's a must for that as well. Let's not forget, a lot of cameras these days are, you've got the option to use lots of big heavy lenses on quite small cameras, so they need support, otherwise they can, and I've seen this happen, bend and break the mount on the camera with the weight of the lens. Yep. So you need to have adequate support, which I've got there on here. This is the Sigma 50 to 100, so it's a fairly weighty lens, stills lens wise. but that's screwed into a little plate there. There's an excellent example Tim's got for you there. Oh look, that does both rails. That's
19
19
and
and
50. I mean, we
50.
have a lot of versions of that. Like this is only 15 mil. So what it does is it has a screw down here, and then you can screw in your lens into it, and then you take the rods as an example, and you mount it onto it, and then this way you are
Oh
having
great,
it
just
like,
drops on. Nice.
yeah, it pops on there and then it locks over here. Exactly. So there are different versions on there. We have quite a lot of different versions depending on what you really need. But so you try to have that as often on there with lens support. Even when you change a lot of lenses, you still want them on there. Okay, how about Jim?
Yeah, I was just going to show you something that I found this morning. These are some lightweight graphite rods that probably, if you take it, this is an older milled heavy metal rod, and it's, I mean, they're very solid. They're going to protect anything you have on there. But as far as weight and balance, this longer rod probably weighs 25% of the graphite rod weighs probably 25% of what the metal one does. I know that there's some stuff. In fact, the one you were just showing is much lighter than these, but and probably is a good combination of what both features I'm talking about. But it's just another, particularly top rods on the top rail. You could probably go with much lighter rods, and it would just, it's going to take another pound off the camera or half a pound off the camera. It's going to help you with the weight. It depends again on what you're doing, where you are, how much you want to protect your camera. I would probably start with the more protective, heavier. There's some titanium rods out there now that are pretty amazing, that are going to protect anything. But there are some options out there that are way lighter and serve the same purpose and help you taking just another little bit of weight off of that camera. Yep.
Yeah, there are some carbon fiber rods on there. For example, those are the ones we offer as an example. The problem what you have with that carbon fiber bends a little bit more. So the stability by using or going to a carbon fiber, you're losing a little bit of stability, but you're gaining the loss of weight. So it's a little bit off. You have to do the trick about that, I think.
Yeah,
But like you said,
I went.
yeah.
I was going to ask, what's the composition of the one you had with the lens support just a minute ago, Tim?
How do you mean? Like the
rails you had that you were demonstrating those on, the other rails you had. Yeah, those rails.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are made out of stainless steel.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got some stainless steel ones here as well, which are, from a bigger setup. I actually had some carbon fiber ones for a while, and yeah, whilst they were a lot lighter, the trade-off for me was too great with the slight flex in them, but also your accessories don't slide along them as easily, and that got really annoying. So I went back to steel ones.
Gotcha.
Yep. Understand. So a lot of people don't know actually about that is we are offering this kind of lightweight supports for ENG cameras. So ENG cameras usually don't have the ability to mount rods below the camera. So what we do is with that kind of plate, we take off the quick block plate from the ENG cameras and put that one on there. And this way you have rods at the front to protect your lens as well, mount accessories to it. And we have those for the Sony ENG cameras, Panasonic ones, Chrosziel. So for all the major brands, we're offering that. And it's something not a lot of people know about it.
I've got one of those somewhere as well.
Perfect.
I modified it for my DSLR, so it was just a quick and easy way to add one onto there. It was a Chrosziel one, but it was from an old ENG camera, and I bastardized it.
So when we're talking about the lens support, how do you balance, or how do you set up the lens support in the right way? Like, do you just open it up that it doesn't have pressure and you close the lock, or do you push slightly the lens up so that it is, the weight is a little bit supported, or what is, do you have any trick or tips for that?
Generally speaking, I think when I'm just thinking when I put that together earlier, I tend to push it up so that you see the lens move, and then release the pressure a little bit so that you know that the weight is on the support, but not pushing up against the camera or letting it come down. So you're trying to keep the lens absolutely at an equilibrium. So I tend to meet the weight and feel where that is, and then lock it.
Yep.
So what we heard about is that, for example, you push up and then close it, and then the lens mount, you open up the lens mount, and when you can nice and easily close it back out, then it means the lens is really nicely balanced. Have you heard about that, or do you agree with that, or?
Makes sense.
That's my tip of the day from Tim.
Perfect. I love that I'm able to give the tips out there. Perfect. By the way, guys, if you have questions, keep asking them. Right now, there are some really nice tips about those, how to cable manage that, about the kipper ties, for example, and the bongo ties. So thanks so much for helping on that. So let's go on to the front. You were already talking about those, the pulling the focus. So how about, like John, you said you love to have a follow focus on the side to focus on the side instead of touching the barrel. So when do you use follow focus on the side, the mechanical one, and when do you use those by really taking your arms around like this, or the fingers?
Generally, it all depends on the lens. So some lenses you use, like big, TV ENG lenses, they've got a lovely feel to them anyway. So I tend to want to use my hands on the barrel for those. But when it comes to cine lenses, things that are obviously built for lens demands in one way or another, so they've actually got rings on, the geared rings, so that you can add these things to them. Then generally, if I can add one, I do, because it just means that your hands are not quite as locked inside the camera sort of setup. You can get away from it quicker to do other things. You have got the option, like that nice one there, of A and B hard stops, so you can set those, so you can very easily calibrate and set up pull focuses. And there's something just about having it there and where you are, because I tend to help with a thumb underneath sometimes to help support the camera, and then I can easily get to the focus, adjust focus on the fly, thumb underneath, help support it. I can easily get to the other parts of the lens if I need to, and yeah, I just prefer it. I suppose it's a nice thing to be able to do, even without the hard stops. It's makes the experience of pulling focus a little bit easier, I guess.
I think, just very quick, an important topic about those mechanical end stops is as well that on your photo lenses, you don't have mechanical end stops. So by knowing where the range of how much the focus really moves with you, this way you get a way better feeling that you don't overdo it. So you really can set the one stop on that one position, the other one you go onto the other side, and then this way you can only pull between that range, and you will never over pull it and continue to pull also it's already at its close point or it's at infinity.
Yeah, it's a really good point. They're often using stills lenses, or what it started as stills lenses, often these days that don't have proper hard ends stops on the lens. So yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's a really important point, and another good reason to use a nice focus wheel.
Yeah. How about Jim?
I would just add that coming from the news background of always having that ENG with that big B4 lens on there, and you know, zooming here and pulling focus here, it took a long time when I switched over to the more cinema cameras to get used to using the focus wheel. But now that I do, it's like I don't want to go back to the other. Um, there are lots of instances where you have a longer lens where it's fine if you're pulling focus here with a longer lens like the MK, but I've also got shorter lenses and you don't have anywhere to pull focus here because the lens is so short. So yeah, I really need that, and I love having the stops, like you said, not just for not over or you know, shooting past your mark or whatever, but also you know, it's gonna keep you, if you have time to get that shot to preset it, you're gonna nail it way more times than not.
Yeah. Actually, we skipped a little bit, or maybe it's a nice topic as well. How about the zoom? Like, if you use a zoom, how how often do you zoom in the on, and how do you use the zoom just for switching real quick the focal lengths? And at the same time, do you use always your hand, or do you prefer to have something like a servo drive on the side to help you on that? Or maybe even there are those zoom sticks, even we offer those, where you have the zoom sticks to make it really fluidly working on there, and even the fluid zooms from us as well.
It really determines what I'm doing. If I'm shooting sports, I'm going to use the zoom quite a bit. If I'm trying to follow a football, I'm going to start on the play tight, pull back, follow the ball, zoom into the person catching it. If I am shooting something very much more feature, I don't want to use a zoom, but I love to have the ability to quickly get where I need to go, you know, in this case, from 18 to 55. I can pop in, pop out. I've got range. And going back to the, you know, the topic of run and gun and being able to do things quickly, it helps. I love being able just to pop in, pop out, and reset the shot.
So popping in
Yeah,
for pulling real quick, focus, and then pop out.
Yeah, or just changing from one shot to the next. I'll
Okay.
use it. And then another thing, we were talking earlier about giving feedback, you know, to the manufacturer, in your case, Chrosziel, and I remember when this motor first came out, I think I had one of the first ones. And one of the things that you guys were amazing about was working on us to get the zoom speeds correct. And you did, you know, I know you did a software upgrade that gave us multiple levels of speed based on what we gave you back as, no, we like something a little softer, a little faster, vice versa. And then you went back and changed the software, and we were able to get it where we needed it. So that kind of feedback, you know, that we can get as the end user, if we want to go back to the manufacturer and say, I like it, but, and then you guys come back and say, well, how about this? And then we worked it out. And, you know, I've got two of these motors on both the lenses, and I love them.
I mean,
yeah,
for
it
those
turns.
developing, just real quick, John, for developing the zoom speeds, we actually, after that first feedback, we invited several video makers or professionals, ENG shooters, to develop those curves. So we offered them a lot of variety, and we had one developer the whole time just developing those various speeds. And we gave it back to those guys. Those guys gave feedback, and we had 2 days of just focusing on that. I actually flew out to manage that as an example. Even if you look at the top plate in regards to feedback, up here you see that we have the cable management, the cable ties from the FX9 when you put a top plate on there, you're losing that usually. So what we did is the first user came back to us and said, hey, I love that cheese plate, but I want those cable fixing options on your top plate. And so we right away got that back, put just a few holes on there in the right size, and this way now you can mount that back up here, so you can continue to use that as an example. So that's for the FX9, and that's so important to get that feedback. If you guys don't talk with us, how should we guess? Unfortunately, we either develop or we are out in the field, but both it's nearly impossible nowadays. Okay, I think since we are quite getting through the hours, we have 40 minutes to go. Please, guys, don't miss to ask any questions you have. I think we are getting to a very interesting topic, the front of the lens, about matte boxes, sunshades, or shadowing the lens. So do you use every time on set something like a matte box or sunshade, or do you do it, you try to avoid it as much as possible? How is it with you guys?
Well, for me, I generally will have a matte box on all the time, if at all possible, because, well, for lots of reasons. We've addressed some already, so that would be protection, quite a good protection for the front of the lens. The purpose of a matte box really is to help control light. So that's the main purpose of having one on there. So you've got various ways of doing that, be it with the filters, be it with the trays in the front to help manage any glare or spill from other lights. You've got the ring at the back that connects the matte box to the actual lens. You don't want light spilling, because I've seen that happen before. Is somebody with a matte box on didn't have the right mount on the back of it, so light was getting through here, and then reflecting off the filter in the matte box back into the lens. So he was getting all this weird flaring and ghosting going on in his image, and he was getting quite frustrated with it. And in the end, I home built a gaffer tape light ring for his matte box, because I could see what the problem was. So having all those things is really useful for controlling light is and also let's not forget, of course, that when you turn up on set, you don't really look like a professional unless you've got a matte box on there. In my opinion, we often have clients say, "Oh, he looks like he knows what he's doing," the matte box certainly.
At the DSLR time, we sold hundreds of rod support and matte boxes because all those DSLR guys wanted to look professional, and this just looks it looks awesome, but totally off topic.
No, it definitely completes the look of your camera setup, but it does that because people equate doing the job properly with having proper light control, and that's only a matte box can really offer you that in such a nice, lightweight, easy to use package.
Yeah. How about Jim? The use of matte boxes. Do you try to use it as often as possible, or sometimes try to skip that?
I use it way more now than I did before, because these cameras are so much more sensitive. And I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was on a shoot in bright sunlight, and I couldn't get where I needed to be on my f-stop. So even using the ND within the camera, I took it as far as it would go, and I couldn't get there. And I'm like, I already had the matte box on. I just need to put the filter in. I'm going to use it for lens shade probably 99% of the time now. That flag being there, whether you're in a studio and it's taking out the glare, or I may not even have a filter in there, but I'm going to have it on for that. But now even more so, being able to get where I want to on that lens with the settings, I was able to go, put a 6 in there and pull 2 stops further and soften the background. And that's the importance of a matte box. And it also gives it, it's only going to make your shot better. It's only going to, you know, in the long run with other types of filters, give you the creativity to put a look on your material even before it goes to post. So many things out there now are, let's shoot it, in a way that they can go into post and put all these effects on it. But if you have more control on what's going to post, if you take time to put the right filter on there, get the right look built in the camera, and give it to them closer to what you think it's supposed to look like when when it's finally finished. So yes, I use it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, John, you mentioned a very interesting topic about you saw the guys using a matte box with the wrong ring size.
So
There are
frustrating.
so many lenses out there with different diameters. And this way you need to have basically the right size of rings for those different lens diameters. For example, just as a really interesting information is, Chrosziel offers nearly 300 different rings.
Wow.
300, like we have a total of about 900 to 950 products we offer. And of those, nearly 300 are just about rings. And the reason why that is, I actually have a variety of that to talk a little bit about that. One of those are those flexi rings. So they have a bellow or the rubber inside of that. So this way you can use at least a few various sizes of lenses and are able to get those different diameters into it. Even here you see there's one going around the MK lens where it's fixed in there, and we have different versions of those. But those for should only work if you have a matte box which is on rod support. So that's actually a thing we're going to talk right after that to get you an idea about what different type of mounting options you have for matte boxes. But if you look at those rings, they are rings specific on that size. So they are really hard milled. So this way you only have that specific diameter. Some of them have screw-ins in the center of that to add filters or even further step downs on that. Some of them have a little cut inside of it. So those cuts make it possible for those clamp-on matte boxes to really stick to your lens. It's really hard to see that for sure on a stream, but so it's really it's an art to find the right ring for the right topic you want to shoot. So John or Jim, how many rings do you have, for example?
I have two basic. I have both clamp-on, very lightweight clamp-on matte box that I use mainly when I'm working quickly. And then I've got the larger one of your Chrosziel matte boxes that is rod mount. I think probably my next step is to get one that swings open. I used to have one that did that a few years back and loved it when we were trying
so
to
let's have a look real quick on that while we are talking about, because I think it's important to understand what we are talking about.
Yeah.
We have various sizes of matte boxes now, the high-end Cinemat box, but it still shows you very nicely about those swingaways. So you have the rod support here down here, and on the side you can open that up. So when you turn that, it moves forward, and then you swing open. I think we have to zoom out a little bit. Can you zoom out a little bit?
Yep.
So now you see it a little bit better. So now it's fixed, and then you swing it open away, and this way you have fully space to change the lens, and you can go back on and then fix it. So that's a swing away matte box. Then we have the rod matte box or the rod support. This is this kind of setup we have here on the camera, where you there's a standard between the 15 mil or 19 mil rods to the center of the lens. All major manufacturers know about that. I can tell you there are some cheaper manufacturers out there who don't stick to the standard because they have not known about it. And we even got requests from customers like if we can make our lightweight support adjustable because their mat box would not fit on there. And we told them, I'm sorry, please, we do a lot for you guys, but please just use the mat boxes where they have those standard optical heights. But you see here, you have those fixed ones, and you just slide them onto the lens, onto the rods, and then you're on there and you fix it below it. So that would be a rod-mounted mat box. And I have as well the clamp-on mat box, which means you don't have any rods around there, and you just mount it to the lens, and then you have here on the side, you have this lever, and you just tighten it, and it closes that ring to and it clamps onto your lens at the front. It's often typical on gimbals, I think, that you would use those clamp-on setups, right?
Yeah, you don't want to add weight of, well, you want to subtract as much weight from your normal setup as possible. So yeah, take the rods off, take the rod support off. Well, that's the heavy bit, I suppose. And yeah, if you can clamp on the mat box and still have that light control in a lighter package, then yeah, clamp on's the only way to go.
Yeah. So those are the three types of mounting, and Chrosziel has a very broad range of mat boxes. I think we were widely known as a mat box company, and wherever you go, whatever rental house you go, they usually always have mat boxes from Chrosziel, and sometimes they are 25 years old and they still work, and they are looking like really horrible dust and sandy and whatever, and we just ask them, why don't you buy a new one from us? Oh, it still works. Yeah, that's how it is.
You made a product that's too good.
Exactly, that's the problem for us, but it's good for them.
But having said that, every time I buy a new camera, generally it's an excuse to get a new mat box. So I think I've got 4 in there now.
Yeah, no, but that's good to hear. Actually, if we look at those rings, we have even rings which have screw-in a possibility into the lens. So this one would go onto a photo lens. This is like a 82 millimeter diameter, which you would screw in. And then this way you have here, you can put the mat box around it and you have it still nicely shadowed. Even that kind of functionality is possible in those range of rings. So if we talk about those mat boxes, you said you use it for shadowing and you use it as a protection as well as for filters. Is there any recommendation you can do on filter size? These mat boxes, depending on the size, of course, it's about the focal length, like the angle of what you see, but as well, it's about the size of your filters. For example, I have here something where you see it's a 4 by 5.6 filter holder you can mount. Here it's a 6 by 6, it's a 5 by 5 actually. And then you have here, for example, a 5.6 by 5.6. Is there anything which you can say on the different diameters or different sizes where you stick to usually? Like what are the most common filters you have or to try to use?
Depends on your lenses again. Generally, we're using, I'd say, between 72 and 82 millimeter front end lenses almost the whole time. So 4x4 filters cover that range fine. As you know, sizes of things go up, you know, cost and things goes up as well. So as you're getting into the bigger cine lenses, like yeah, Arri Master Primes we had on the Steadicam a little while ago, and you know the front of those things is absolutely huge. So you need a bigger matte box. Yeah, much bigger filters as well. So it depends on the lenses you're using really. But I've always been happy by. I've got some bigger ones, but I've got a set of 4x4s with me all the time.
How about Jim?
I would basically have the same. I have some 4x4s. I've got some older clamp-on mat boxes that have the 4x4 size, and then most the two more current mat boxes I have are 4x5, 6 for pretty much everything we do.
I mean,
Okay.
I can recommend some filters that everybody should have. So 2 or 3 levels of ND is always useful, especially these days when, as Jim said, the sensors in the cameras are getting, that much brighter. So in order to achieve your shallow depth of field that everybody likes, you need to stop down the amount of light coming into the lens. So ND, 2 or 3 levels of ND filter is always useful.
Why not using
A-
the ND filters of the camera?
Well, sometimes they don't go far enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I particularly on the FS7, I found even last week I was putting another step of ND in the matte box on the front again of the maximum level of ND in the camera because we were in a really bright environment. But they
And
still
because
wanted f1.8,
yeah, and you didn't
shallowness.
want to change the ISO.
It was already at the minimum.
Okay. So
Yeah,
it was really
so
too much light. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, it was outdoors on one of those really hot days we had, and it was
Yeah.
yeah the where whatever I did, I could not get away from the overblown highlights on the face, so had to be another step of ND. Something else that's useful with that. We are now used to having more dynamic range available, which everybody likes to go on about, but I think actually is probably a bit overhyped. So to control your image without needing to grade it massively afterwards, I always have a graduated ND filter with me. So oftentimes you can see the sky in a shot. Often the sky is much brighter than your subject or the foreground object, so I tend to just slot in my little 4x4 graduated ND, darkens the sky down a little bit, and presto, you're within that, what would end up being a Rec 709 threshold. You've equalized the brightness of the image quite nicely, and that's another filter I always have with me because I use it all the time. And you can use it to offset, highlighted areas anywhere in the frame, of course, with the matte boxes that have these useful rotating filter trays. Here, for example, earlier on that window was way brighter than I was. It still is if I point at it there. So what I do is put my graduated ND in, and I just pull it in from the side a little bit until it darkened down that window a little bit, and then all the exposure is within the range of the camera. Everything looks nice. I wonder if I can do that with this ND filter. So there we go. So my grad ND is in the cupboard, but that's the difference. So I can just get all that information back in the in the view out of the window by putting a little ND just in that area, and that's what having a grad ND enables you to do.
But if we talk about that, if you want to have that rotating and being able to pull that up and down, you would need a way bigger filter than your lens diameter, right? So that would be a case
Yeah.
of where you really would maybe get to a 5.6 by 5.6 filter, or what size would you go for that?
Yeah, again, it depends on your lens
Yeah,
sizes.
yeah, yeah.
I tend to be using the smaller, this one, for example. So when I'm out shooting quickly, this is the Sony 18-105. It's the most useful lens I own. That's got quite a small 72mm front end. So when that is on the FS7, a 4x4 grad ND covers that quite nicely. And if it goes a little bit off one corner or whatever, you can say that's art.
So you're basically saying for sure you need one filter holder and that needs to be rotatable. Guys, just to let you know, what we're talking about is for some of the guys more on the introduction level is you have the matte box and then you have filter stages here in the back where you can stack them, and usually matte boxes have between no filter up to 3 filter stages. So here we have a setup of 2. How about filter slots? How many would you usually use? Like we have lost John in his gear back there, gear room, but Jim, how about you? How many filter holders would you normally prefer to have with you?
I generally 1 to 2. You know, I the one filter that I have in addition to what he was recommending is a polarizer, and I love being able to crisp up the sky and get the polarizer out, and particularly if you need to turn that to dial it in, you know, you've got the ability to do that with your matte box. And then I would, you know, if I needed to get another stop or 2 after that, you know, I could put some ND in there and be good to go.
Yeah, in regards to polarizer, it's more visible where you have the reflections on cars and car shields and lakes and stuff like that, right?
Yes. Yeah, I live on a big lake, so we do a lot of stuff around the water, and a lot of sky and a lot of water.
I mean, on that creative side, I think this can get, we could talk 2-3 hours about that for sure. I recommend you guys to, for example, visit the Tiffen website. I mean, we here in Germany are Tiffen, Schneider, and even further filter distributors, but the Tiffen website shows very nicely those different kind of filters and what you can do with that. So I just love that website, how it's done, but maybe there are other websites out there too, but it's really a creative thing what you can do with that.
Yeah, I've got a Tiffen filter here actually, which is those of you who are DSLR shooters. One of the most useful filters I've ever bought is this variable ND, and it's a Tiffen one. It's a Tiffen, I think they just call it Vari ND, and it essentially feels like you're pulling iris with the ND filter. There's pluses and minuses to that ability, but when you're on a DSLR that you don't have built-in ND filters, and you're on a gimbal or something like that where you don't have the ability to add a very big matte box onto the front of it, especially something like this, a Vari ND is a really good purchase. But it's not
this is really
the same quality as, it's nothing like the same quality as, proper, I would say proper filters, proper big square filters, that they're optically not as good. They have usually introduced some sort of color cast onto your image, which you then have to white balance to try and correct. So it's always a toss up, but I mean, look how nice that looks, just to add a little bit of example of what that variable ND can do, that graduated ND can do. So yeah, that's quite a good, useful thing. I'm a Tiffen fan anyway, because they are the licensees of Steadicam. So they're my friends at Tiffen.
for sure. Okay, so I think we talked quite a lot about those matte boxes. So you have shadowing, you have the French flags on the top or even on the side flags. So depending on where light spills into your image, sometimes you want some lens flares, sometimes you want to avoid those. What is the strategy of you guys between using a French flag, like a top flag, a side flag, in regards to some mattes inside of the box? You can slide in mattes in between where you can reduce the size of how much light can go in there. So when do you use inside mattes? I don't have one here with me. I didn't prepare for that. In comparison to using a top or a side flags. Or do you always use just top and side flags? Oh, there we go. There's one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the pop-in mats that go in the front of your filter. I tend to keep that one on most of the time because it just fits most of my lenses. But essentially, as you zoom in, you can then add smaller and smaller aperture these things to again help. So if there's flare coming from that light over there and it's just coming into here, pop the mat in, and you've controlled that without having to add a big flag on the end or the top of the thing. Generally, though, I find that changing the mats is a slower, more complicated process slightly than just adding the flag. So I tend to use the French flag more than changing the mats. And even more regularly, I'll shout at one of the lighting guys and he'll adjust the light. So it depends on what situation you're in and what kit you've got available.
Yeah, I would just say, just second that, saying that because we're trying to do things quickly, it's easier just to lower the flag or raise the flag and either let light in or knock it down a little bit.
Yeah, you'll find, guys, that we're probably talking quite a lot. We about moving quickly and adjusting things quickly and adapting quickly, because time is money in film and television. And I know that a lot of guys who are on film courses, when I was doing my degree, for example, we had a huge amount of time to do stuff. When you're on set in a real working environment, you don't. And speed becomes one of the biggest considerations for almost everything, equipment particularly.
Yes, for sure. And again, now it's coming about the gear you are using, because the gear has to be rock solid. It has to be precise. It has to, it should not, you should be able to focus on getting the shot and thinking about how do I want to get that shot, and not how I want to somehow get that gear going or working or keep it working or whatever, So that's for sure a topic, yeah.
Yeah, completely. Speed, reliability, and sturdiness, I think probably are, is the three big considerations when it comes to equipment. Does it do what I want it to do? Does it do that consistently? Is it going to break if I drop it? And can it be done quickly? And that's that's more important than price, because the things that do that pay for themselves very quickly in terms of how long you keep them. You keep them longer, they help you work quicker, and you get the job again. So that bit of equipment's justified its expense, in one job sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, we have 15 minutes to go. And Colette already told us we are not allowed to go that much over it, so we should.
It's dinner time for me after that.
Yeah, we should respect that. For us, it's a beer time, but still, if you have any questions, now it's really the time to start typing those in, because otherwise we will not be able to cover them. We have still some ideas of what we want to talk about, but still, if you want some of your question answered, you slowly need to start typing those in and asking them. There we go. One was raising his hand. So even Jesse, if you want to say something, I don't know if we have to. Colette, do we have to give them the chance to do that?
Oh,
Well,
sorry,
by
Jesse.
accident.
We want to be as useful to you guys as possible, right? So do
oh, it was by
ask
okay.
us what you want to know.
Okay, but let's continue maybe a little bit on the creative side. We were talking already a little bit about zooming. How about focus? Like, how often or when do you use autofocus?
Never. The only time, well, I say never. The only time I would use autofocus is with a gimbal. If I've got a DSLR doing something very quickly on a gimbal, then I would possibly use autofocus. But with the bigger cameras, I'm either going to have help with someone pulling focus for me, or we're going to do it. But it's just autofocus in my world doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a reliability issue and consistency. You know, we build our careers on being reliable and consistent. And if you're leaving something on automatic, that means it can't be consistent because it's thinking differently every time. Whereas if you're on, got everything set manually, you know that that's not going to change between take or whatever. It's exactly the same for me. I tend to use autofocus very sparingly, only on the gimbals really, not even on Steadicam actually. There's usually somebody pulling focus there. However, just to as a modern sort of caveat for that, I've got some friends quite a lot of friends now, who've got FX9s, which is has Sony's new absolutely amazing autofocus, and they say they actually use it quite a lot.
Uh-oh.
Oh, that was John. John used too much autofocus, or maybe,
I think that was auto iris.
yeah, or maybe it was. Oh, there he is back.
Sorry.
Or it was Canon stopping him from. What kind of camera model do you use for the
For
transmission right
this,
now? Yeah,
this is a Nikon Z6 on
so
autofocus.
Nikon,
I should
saying, hey,
just
he's
point that
talking
out.
good about Sony. No.
No, that's right. Yeah, it knew. Yeah. But they say actually they're because that autofocus now on that new camera is so reliable and useful and programmable, so they can literally set it to out of the 4 or 5 people in the scene, that person's face, and it will track them dead on.
Yeah.
They're actually using autofocus a lot more. So I think that equation, professionally, is changing a little bit with that new camera, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to get real quick on that, or use that opportunity to talk about, while you were saying about I have an assistant as soon as you go into Steadicam. What you are using then a wireless fizz unit, and I just want to let you know, for example, this is a Magnum Mini setup. It's a 1-channel driver, and then you have that hand unit to it, and this way you are able to control focus. And then if you want a 2-channel driver or a 3-channel driver, you can have focus and zoom, or focus and iris, or focus, zoom, and iris. It's called the Magnum system from us, and it has been used, for example, on the FIFA World Cup in Brazil. It has been used at different Champions League games for Steadicam. So a lot of Steadicam guys are using it. So just to let you know, you take that motor, mount it on the rod, and then you have those wireless control, which go usually up to 300 feet or more. And I'm already seeing John has went to the museum and,
Yes.
and shows some of our wireless fizz, which had been there decades ago.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know about
this is
that?
very old.
Yeah, we were one of the first developing a wireless fizz unit and introducing wireless fizz control to the world. It was called Genio at that time. I think this is a Fox, or is it a Genio?
Yeah. This is a straight Genio system.
Yeah.
16-bit digital. This.
Yes. So we were one of those, and yeah. And
This is
we have a lot
this
of
is my
experience.
backup wireless fizz unit. That it lives in the bottom of the cupboard, barely ever comes out. But when it does, it always works.
It's
That's
unfortunately
why I've never got
always
rid of it.
works. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have
Although
customers
I
who
haven't,
send
I
it.
haven't se- I don't think I've switched it on for 6 months. I've accidentally turned it on, and it's still fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is a problem we have because the gear lasts. Still, we have a lot of guys who don't want to upgrade from a Fox or Genio or DigiFox to the new latest model.
Oh no, I want
because,
to. I'll happily swap it with you. Tim.
Yeah, but yeah, we want it as a trade-in deal, but that's again off topic. So while we were talking about autofocus, how about auto iris? You guys are using auto iris?
No.
No.
Generally speaking, never. No.
Okay. Okay.
Occasionally on Steadicam, but only if you're going from a really bright environment to right inside. If you haven't got anyone pulling iris, then it has been useful once or twice, but literally once or twice ever.
Okay.
Generally
Yeah.
speaking, no, not even
Yeah.
on this. I've got the focus. The focus is tracking nicely, but iris, yeah, I'm doing myself.
Yeah. Actually, I think we did a good job. We were able to keep all the people over that whole 2 hours. We didn't lose one guy. I think we lost maybe one guy. So we must have been talking not too much stupid stuff. So it seemed to be interesting. And we didn't get much questions, unfortunately. Either they are all asleep or they just love what they're talking about. So still, it's getting to the last chance for asking questions, guys. But we have one thing I think want to talk about at the end. Also, it's for the next shoot. Before the shoot, it's about preparing for the shoot. I think it's a very important topic. And yeah, John, do you or no? Let's start with Jim this time. I think Jim has not had the chance to talk as much as John had. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about, yeah, let us know a little bit about prepping the shoot. What do you do?
Well, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but finding out what you are being asked to do is probably the starting point. You know, you have to have a good relationship with a client. You have to have a good communication with the producer that you're working with. You need to know exactly what equipment to bring, and then in order to prepare properly, you have to have the time set aside to, you know, if I need one camera, it's going to take a whole lot less time to prep one camera for the shoot than it is for three. You know, do we have any specialty elements of the shoot? Do I need to coordinate with a Steadicam operator in my case? You know, do they want a couple drone shots? Do I need to make sure that I've got someone that can help me with that? You know, do I need a gimbal? But then you've got to take everything and put it all together in the package in a way that you don't want to send three cameras out there that are set up three different ways. So what I'm going to ask, you know, what frame rate are we shooting at? What's the look you want? What's the style you want? These are basic questions that sometimes, I hate to say this, but the producer doesn't even know the answer to. They say, well, I don't know what frame rate we're shooting. Do I, you know, am I going to shoot this a straight rec 709 and give it to them already color corrected, or am I going to shoot S-Log, or what? What are you going to do with this product in post? These are all questions you have to ask, you know, that help you prepare properly. And then in my case, I've got a Sprinter van with a lot of gear. I'm going to come into my warehouse. I'm going to take the cameras out. I'm going to take the lenses out. I'm going to put the cameras together. I'm going to make sure I've got backup. And, you know, we're going to make sure all the batteries are charged. We're going to make sure that nobody borrowed a light for another shoot and didn't put it back where it goes. You know, the more you can take care of your equipment, and this is a big tip that I really preach in my shop, is if you take something out of a box, then it goes back in that box, because the first time I need that on that shoot, that's where it's going to be. I don't have to go, well, what happened to cable X that goes with this light? Or, you know, where's the whip? I've got a dolly shot and I can't find the whip for my focus. You know, it's everything goes back in and out where it's supposed to be and has a place in my shop. And that's, you know, that's getting beyond prepared, but that's what it takes to get there and make everything go smoothly. You know, I talked about having a plan B a little bit. You've got to, you know, John talked about backup cables and other accessories, you know, water. What, you know, what you learn after doing this year after year is what the questions are and how to answer them before that problem comes up. So, you know, the more you can think through a project and find out exactly what you think you're going to have try to have that answer before that question comes to you the day of the shoot. And you know, that's kind of where we are and what we try to do. And I try to put at least, you know, half the amount of time that the shoot's going to take into preparation the day before.
And it's not only about charging batteries, right?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, yeah. John, anything to add on that? I think Jim was quite precise on that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how we try and do it as well here. The slight MacGuffin to that is when you've got lots of different crew using your kit, and you know they don't put things back in the right boxes. You know, you've got to put time aside just to sort your gear out again, because it just ends up all in the mess. Especially when you hire things out. I hire bits and pieces out, and despite the fact that even the holes in the cases are labelled, the gear doesn't end up back in the right place. That just seems to be a pathological problem with people who hire equipment. They can't put things back in the right place. And it is very frustrating and can, you know, be quite dangerous on the, you know, if you're going out with the same gear the next day and something isn't in there that you need, that, you know, that's going to make you look you're very very ill prepared in the eyes of your client or your producer or director. So looking after your kit is number one.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Actually, what I would like to do is show you real quick, since we are running now out of time. If you have time here on the Filmscape website, visit the Chrosziel virtual booth and then have a look. Here you see a little bit about the latest developments we have done, as well as some of our products. It's just it's an outline of products we do offer. I just do a real quick scroll through there. But for sure, we would like to welcome you on our website. So Chrosziel.com is a website to go for, and we try to have some knowledge on those websites. And so I think if you have any questions as well, you can anytime write an email to info@Chrosziel.com to get some support from us guys. And we are Germans, but we do talk English and we try to write English. Some use Google Translate, but some are native speakers. I'm not, but others in here are Native Americans even. So we try to support you guys as good as possible. So I think now it's the time to say thank you to Jim and John for giving us so perfect knowledge and answers and insights on your work as well. Thanking you guys joining this webinar. We really appreciated you being with us. And Colette asked us to tell you, for one, you should have lunch break now, if I understood that right, as well as please visit the virtual booths of all the exhibitors of the Filmscape. Thank you guys so much. And since we are a Bavarian company, at the end of a shoot, at the end of everything, you need to have a beer. So I say cheers to all you guys and thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. I'm going to go and refill my glass.
That's a good point. Cheers.
Prost.
Thanks.
Oh, there we go. We got lots of people responding with German. That's good stuff. I'm afraid mine is limited to ein Bier bitte, but that's.
Well, that's an important one. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. It was really a great session, I think.
I
actually didn't thank our camera guy, our camera kid Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. I'm sure you were virtually operating our cameras too. Although Jim, I think Jim's got an assistant there.
I do, Mr. Malcolm.
Unfortunately, my, unfortunately, mine is Len, and he's a cat, and he's not really very good on the focus.
He's great on the autofocus.
Yeah.
That's
Thanks,
right.
guys. Welcome to end this at any time or sit around and chat more. Still a few people hanging on, I think, finding this fun.
Yeah, it actually was really fun talking. So I'm not sure if how fast we have to jump out of it, but yeah,
Tim,
really
were you happy?
appreciate it. I'm sorry.
Were you happy with everything?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a very informative way of talking. We addressed a lot of different gears, and I really wanted to give some inside knowledge or tips and tricks about setting up gear, and I think somehow we were able to transport knowledge, I think. So John, it's getting late for you as well, but Jim, you're middle of the day, right?
It's time for a late lunch.
Late lunch, okay.
Yeah, we're going out to a nice local pub for dinner with my parents who don't live far away.
Nice.
So I shall
So no
have
shoot for tomorrow? Tomorrow free day?
actually, we're going to Oxford for the next few days to shoot. It's like some pretty stuff. It's more like library stuff for a company. But I happen to have a friend who used to go to university there, so he's coming along as my assistant, and it's a good excuse to spend some time with him, and he can show me round while we're just trying to catch some pretty images.
Yeah. On the other hand, it's right now not that much of fun with all those preventive
No,
actions you have to do about. I mean, we didn't actually address that at all. Maybe that would have been a nice idea to talk about, like how you right now try to prepare for those safety things. But
yeah, it's been really odd over here. We've had kind of a several different ideas about it. So some of my friends have been on shoots where everyone has been full PPE the whole time, and then others have turned up and it just seems like normal. They've done a COVID talk at the beginning, and then nobody's really paid any attention to it for the rest of the day. Whereas in the US, I see some of my colleagues have gone to the extent of having not just mouth and nose and whatever, but eye protection as well. Even when they've got the camera on their shoulder, I saw one of the guys out of LA had actually made a face mask with a hole in it, a face shield with a hole in it for the viewfinder, so that they were full face protection even when the camera's on their shoulder. What have you experienced, Jim?
well, yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I said Jim. I was just going to say that we've had to rethink our business model. I mean, we really had to change some things when all this happened, because so much of what I do is going into other people's, did before is going into other people's businesses.
Yeah,
And
me
they
too,
don't
yeah.
want you there. I mean, the doors are shut. So, like with all the racing stuff I do, we do a lot of stuff in their race shops during the week as they're preparing for the race. And they just said, I'm sorry, you can't come. We were able to build the set that I'm sitting in my office, and talk to the people at Fox Sports and say, we can make this a protected, safe place. Nobody comes in and out of here without masks on. Nobody, we have hand sanitizer at the doors. We go through a protocol. Fox requires every day you work to go through an online screening, temperature check. So it's been pretty tight. And at the end of the day, everything in this building, all surfaces get wiped down. Everything is clean. But we tried to create a safe place where they could actually come to us, and thanks to a couple live view units, we basically turned it into a live studio, and it's been able to basically save our business for the last 3 months. We just started getting to go back out again. I've done 2 shoots out of the office this week, this past week, and it was nice to get to go back out.
Yeah, I've only done 2 or 3 total, and we set up we did very similar. We set up a little green screen in the other room, and had a surprising amount of work from it. Just so people could, some of it I've been presenting stuff that I've never been asked to do before, because companies need somebody representative in front of the camera. They can't get the CEO there, or you can't get to the CEO. So I've done a few of these blooming things, and it's really strange way to work. How is it in Germany?
Well, we have 2 things actually. What comes into my mind right now, we have got a lot of questions about what is the strategy of sanitizing your gear. So that's really something where we were sitting there like, well, just use the cleaners you would use anyhow and just clean it with that. So it's really something we didn't have the right.
Put it in the shower. Put it in the shower. Give it a rinse down.
Exactly. I mean, the good thing is a lot of mechanical stuff, it doesn't matter that much. But on the electronic side, they're right. I mean, we have a lot of splash waterproofness inside of that. Actually, the interesting thing is, for some countries, our wireless fizz units are picking up in the sales business because they have laws passed. Distance.
Yeah.
So in China, for example, the assistant is not allowed to get to the camera anymore. So they have to have wireless fizz on every shoot they are doing. So the camera has to have as few people on there as possible. And China has big sets with a lot of people, so they are getting there. So that's an interesting point for us, that we focus on getting at least a little bit more business on that side, since business for sure is slow for us as well. On the other hand, in Germany, they introduced green, yellow, red zone. And within those zones, you are not allowed to pass zones to the other. So the green zone is basically the camera. And then you have the yellow zone, which is around the set, and the red zone is more the village kind of. So, and if you want to go from one zone to the other, you're basically not allowed. You can just hand over gear, but you are not allowed to go into different zones.
Wow.
And that's happening on feature films, but even on broadcast productions, kind of in that way. Interesting how they handle it. And I mean, we were one of the first restarting soccer transmission, as an example, right? Or soccer games, of course, without spectators, but still the camera crews had to go in. So there were a lot of rules about sanitizing, and I mean, for us, the amount of virtual online meetings we had with potential customers is crazy. We invested into new gear to just get the information and the details going as good as possible. Even those kind of webinars, we are going to continue to invest into more lighting. I mean, now it's getting dark out there, and so the light inside the showroom, we have a lot of windows, has gone now. So we will have to invest into more panels and stuff like that. And we for sure will continue to do those kind of sessions. Yesterday we had a session with the Lens Kerner Summit with 100 people talking about a lens projector. It's such a specific topic, and we had so many people joining that. So we will have to set ourselves in the marketing and presentation and meeting side totally different. On the other hand, my family never had me that much before, on all those trade shows, traveling. It's nice as well to be more home. Or even we are saving money, to be honest. Trade shows are so expensive, and right now we are, all those losses we do by having less sales, at least the marketing side is less expensive right now, and we can invest into digital marketing. So we're going to launch a new website, for example, in about 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, our marketing head of marketing is listening right now, and she probably she's laughing, so she knows there's pressure on the time schedule, but but we have to change a lot inside the company for that.
Wow.
Well, I'm sure we could continue this discussion forever. There's so much
For sure,
to
got
go
it. Okay.
about.
Well, thank you so
you
much for giving us the opportunity to talk and
Thank you for
to present.
I know, we're pretty much the only trade show going on, and tried to do it in some sort of small scale, at least to make it something that we could actually accomplish in those times. Thank you guys.
I just realised you almost had an exclusive in that I entirely forgot that I've got a prototype Sackler head on that tripod that you shouldn't see. I'm just going to sit in front of it.
It's out of focus, so it's just like
that's how I think.
Cars with.
We got away with it.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much, and everybody who's still on here, head over to Chrosziel's virtual booth, and you can see everybody else's booth at filmscapechicago.com. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Yes.
Thanks, John and Jim. Thank you all. Thanks,
You got
Colette.
Talk soon.
Bye bye.
Thanks, guys. Dankeschön.
Danke.